From this point, I will focus on structural organization. The next part of presentation will be dedicated to the formation of a line of defenders. Before I move on to this topic, I would like to emphasize that I enjoy it when my team plays in different formations. It's important to understand that specific player positioning directly correlates with the frequency of certain actions in the game. For example, the Christmas tree concept is not feasible if there is only one 6 in the central zone of the pitch. Therefore, depending on various factors, I like to compete in different formations. What gives me the most pleasure is competition where my team can function in multiple formations and is capable of consciously modifying them depending on the needs that arise at any given moment. When I think about the structural organization of my team, I consider whether I want to play with a line of 4 defenders or 3. I analyze how many midfielders I should assign to the central sector of the pitch, 2 or 3. I also consider whether 1 or 2 forwards should be responsible for scoring goals. In my mind, I'm also constantly thinking about player profiles and the composition I arrange when deciding on a specific starting 11. Unless there are other indications, I usually opt for starting with a formation of 4 defenders. I believe that a starting structure with 4 defenders offers greater reorganization possibilities. In my view, it's easier to introduce a fullback into the central sector of the pitch in this system. In a formation with 3 defenders, the wingbacks stick to the sidelines, which causes the wingers to often occupy the half spaces. There is less positional rotation and interchange of spaces between players. The way of playing in a system with 3 defenders is, however, easier to explain to players. They quickly grasp the concept of managing specific spaces and better understand their roles in positional play. This is because they don't have to constantly search for and occupy the appropriate zones, but instead operate within spaces designated by the coach. In a system with 4 defenders, wingers are less assigned to specific places and can play wider. This in turn means that the half spaces can be filled not only by fullbacks but also by one of the central midfielders. In my game idea, this task is primarily assigned to the number 10 and occasionally also to the number 8. As I mentioned, the structure in my game idea constantly changes during the competition depending on the player's activities. first activity I will present which affects this change is the reorganization of the defense line from 4 to 3. Players can do this in two ways, depending on the profiles of the players in specific positions. The first method is implemented by the player in position number 6 and the second by the player in position number 8. The player in position number 6 is responsible for controlling the space of the first square, constantly creating a passing lane. This player is not mobile and doesn't cover spaces, but operates in a design area. Therefore, to create a line of 3 defenders, this player drops his position, filling the space between the central defenders. On the other hand, the player in position number 8 is a midfielder whose task is to fill the space from penalty area to penalty area. He is very mobile and, unlike the player in position number 6, is not assigned to a specific space. He prefers progression with the ball rather than passing, which distinguishes him from the player in position number 6. To create a line of 3 defenders, the central midfielder with the profile of 8 steps out of position and moves to one side, positioning himself next to one of the central defenders to start his actions. Despite the different role, it's crucial for the player with this profile to be able to operate within the opponent's structure, if only because he fills the first square when the holding midfielder is involved in the reorganization of the defensive line. The only central midfielder in my game idea not responsible for reorganizing the defense line is the so-called number 10. This player virtually never leaves the inferior of the opponent's structure, controls the space of squares 2 and 3, and maintains numerical superiority between the lines. The prepared model shows how to reorganize the team's structure, presenting it in a system with 3 defenders. My game idea also defines the way to fill the spaces in the side corridors of the pitch, namely the wide corridor and the half spaces. The responsibility for this task lies with 2 players who usually operate in these areas, the fullback and the winger. Players positioned along the sideline also have specific profiles. They can be players who occupy spaces or those who resemble central midfielders more closely. In my game idea, I call the former runners and the latter playmakers. When selecting a team for a match, it might happen that 2 defenders will have a runner profile and 2 wingers will have a playmaker profile. In this case, the defenders will play closer to the sideline and the wingers will occupy the half spaces. Alternatively, defenders might have a playmaker profile and wingers might have a runner profile. In this situation, the wingers will play closer to the flanks and the defenders will act as inverted fullbacks. In the last scenario, it might occur that on one side a defender will be a runner and on the other a playmaker. Similarly, on one side a winger will be a playmaker and on the other a runner. In such a situation, the team will compete in an asymmetric structure where one of the defenders creates numerical superiority in the central area of the pitch, supported by the winger. The other defender and winger will be responsible for actions outside the opponent's structure. The prepared diagram illustrates how the team's structure reorganizes from the initially adopted 1-4-3-3 system to a 1-3-1-4-2 system. The 1-3-1-4-2 system allows my team to compete with one number 6. However, if my players see the need to employ the double 6 concept, they will reorganize the structure again. In such a case, the team might designate an inverted fullback as a second number 6, and the number 10 will transition from a forward role to occupying a half space, as shown in the prepared diagram. In this setup, my team will periodically compete in a 1-3-2-2-3 system. Understanding how players with different profiles occupy spaces allows us to predict the main relationships they will form. Such a relationship will certainly be established between the central defender, midfielders with profiles 6 and 8, and the inverted fullback competing within the half space. However, one of the three central defenders doesn't necessarily have to deliver the ball to the half space. By moving into the midfield, the fullback can draw the opponent's attention, isolating the winger from the defender. An alternative action by the central defender might lead to passing the ball to the winger positions wide, which could result in an action unfolding outside the opponent's structure. If the team opts for an asymmetric strategy, it can utilize actions such as underlapping or overlapping. Conversely, if it decides to use a player remaining inside the opponent's structure, it can employ the action of running through the half space. As confirmed by the description of my style of play, structural organization is closely correlated with the functional organization of the game idea and the profiles of players involved.